The year is 1923. Two teenagers sneak out of their homes in the middle of the night in Florida City. Rumor had it that an old man was building a rock castle by himself. But every time someone tried to see what the old man was doing, he would stop working. The curious teens managed to sneak into Ed's backyard and saw something they could later describe as magic. They recalled seeing rocks moving around like helium balloons. The old man was moving up to 30 tons of stone by himself to build his castle. Even if he didn't allow anyone to see him working, he would proudly talk about it around the town. But whenever people asked how he was building a stone castle all on his own, he simply answered, "I cracked the secret of the pyramids." This story begins in Latvia, Edward Leedskalnin's home country. Edward was born in a small village on January 12, 1887. He was born in a family of stonemasons, which is probably where he learned ancient techniques of building. However, he grew up as a sickly boy, which meant he could never carry much weight or undergo heavy physical activity. At the age of 26, an unfortunate turn of events determined Ed's fate. The love of his life broke off their engagement, and heartbroken Ed decided to move to the United States. He lived in a couple of American states before finally moving to Florida, where his life's adventure started. Ed spent years searching for the right spot of land to build his dream house. He always rejected good farmland. When people wondered why, he only smiled. Finally, when he bought land of his own, it was deemed terrible by his close friends. The soil was bedrock. He could neither plow nor farm it, but it seemed perfect for what he was seeking to build. Ed's close friends would often describe him as eccentric. When asked why he wanted to build a house, he would only say, "It's for my sweet 16. Someday she's coming back." Then, he changed the topic of the conversation. It took Ed about 30 years to finish Coral Castle, and he did it all by himself. He would only work under the cloak of night and never let anyone see what he was doing. The completed Coral Castle embodies a number of unsolved mysteries. If you were to visit the site back then, you'd have to go through a 9-ton, 8-foot-tall revolving gate door that even a kid could push with just one finger. Ed was so proud of this door that he originally named the site Rock Gate Park. It was renamed Coral Castle only much later, after Ed's passing. Once inside, visitors would access the incredible wonders of Ed's constructions: towers, mystic symbols, furniture, and swing sets, all made entirely of monolithic blocks of stone. The stones are set on top of each other, using only their weight to keep them together. And believe it or not, the entire park gathers around 1,100 tons of stone. Today, if you visit Ed's living quarters, you'll even see the simple instruments he used to construct all of this: chisels, hammers, ropes, and pulleys. The type of work he did is difficult even with modern-day equipment, let alone without it. Coral Castle's main mystery lies in how Ed managed to do it. The only photograph of Ed Leedskalnin at work shows a simple leverage structure of a chain hoist attached to a wooden tripod. The tripod was made of old telephone poles with a small wooden box on top. What was in the box is, of course, a mystery. Unfortunately, he took his secrets with him, not sharing the truth of his work with anyone else. Yet, not all is lost, as there are many theories and speculation surrounding what could have happened there. One theory says that there is a harmonic grid inside the Earth's surface, something that would create anti-gravity spots around the globe. It's believed that Coral Castle was built in such a spot. This could explain why it took Ed so long to find land that pleased him. Maybe what he was looking for was a place that allowed him to experiment with anti-gravity forces. Yet, whenever Ed talked about his work, he would say he understood the laws of weight and leverage, and, sure thing, that he had cracked the secret of the pyramid builders. And what secret is that, you might ask? According to Ed himself, it has to do with magnetism. He even published a pamphlet called Magnetic Current. There, he explains that every object has magnetic particles inside of them. A person just needs to understand where they are located inside such objects. This way, objects can be lifted and moved around without much effort, just like moving something heavy underwater. Researchers say that if we assume Ed Leedskalnin and the pyramid builders used the same technique, then it would only have taken 4,700 workers to build the Great Pyramid of Giza, instead of the 20,000 to 100,000 that is currently estimated. But this story just keeps on getting more and more mysterious. In the late 1920s, Ed was finishing the construction of Coral Castle in Florida City. Rumors about his work had spread around town. People said Ed was hiding a stash of money somewhere in his living quarters. One night, a group of men waited until Ed was alone and broke into the castle to rob him. They couldn't find the money and, luckily, didn't harm Ed. But in the following days, he decided that it was best he moved out of that land. Of course, he took more than his toothbrush along with him. Ed decided to move the entire Coral Castle to another land 10 kilometers away from where he had built the park. Legend says he hired a truck driver and asked him to swear secrecy about what Ed intended to do. He asked the driver to look away while Ed loaded the truck by himself, moving all of the rocks without any help. With the truck loaded, Ed and his castle moved to Homestead, Florida, where the park is located until this day. In 1986, a group of engineers from Florida University was called to try to fix the park's gate entrance, the 9-ton revolving door that Ed was so proud of. They arrived with plenty of modern-day equipment, including a 20-ton crane. When the engineers took the door down, they noticed that Ed had used a strange circular stone at the bottom of the revolving door. The engineers couldn't understand how this frisbee-sized rock could withstand 9 tons of weight without breaking into pieces. They sent the rock to the geology department at the University of Florida, but the geologists simply returned the rock, saying they couldn't find a match of this rock in their databases. They couldn't determine its origin. The engineers put the 9-ton gate back into place, trying to use other techniques. At first, it didn't work without the base rock Ed had originally used. So, they had to cut the gate rock to make it work as a revolving door once again, proving that modern-day technology couldn't replicate what Ed had done single-handedly. Fast forward to 2011, and another man claimed to have cracked the code of the pyramid builders and Ed Leedskalnin himself. Wally Wallington, a retired construction worker from Lapeer County, Michigan, has managed to build using similar techniques to those used by Ed. Wallington is known for having built his personal Stonehenge in Michigan. He is said to have used simple machines, such as levers and counterweights, moving around multi-thousand-pound concrete blocks. Unlike Ed, Wallington has shared his techniques with the public. Multiple videos are showing the clever engineering he built from very simple materials. It sure is impressive. The man has moved his entire barn into another property just with the help of simple tools. However, there is no way to prove that these were the same techniques used to build Coral Castle. To this day, the secrets of Coral Castle haven't been unraveled. But hey, we can always keep trying to solve it.
This is not a dune set. This is a very real desert in Niger. Jado was probably built by the nomadic Sao people and is filled with ksars, which are fortified houses made of salt and clay, with giant walls and secret passages. Located deep in the desert, it was once a vital stop for trans-Saharan caravans, but is now a hotspot for smugglers and bandits. The site has been off-limits since 2002 due to its dangers. The origin of the ksars remain a mystery. No archaeological studies have been conducted, leaving many questions unanswered. Even today, shifting sands reveal and conceal parts of these ancient ruins, fueling local speculation about what might still be hidden beneath the desert. Speaking of connective tunnels, scientists were blown away by the discovery of lava tubes in Saudi Arabia. These underground passages form when molten lava cools down. Researchers believe that ancient nomadic groups may have utilized these tunnels to survive the super harsh desert climates. While excavating the tunnels, archaeologists uncovered artifacts, rock art, and skeletal remains. The art and animal bones show that the people who used the tunnels were probably sheep and goat herders. They're still piecing together whether these groups lived in the tunnels for extended periods or just used them as temporary shelters. The Great Pyramid of Giza has been standing for thousands of years, but it's still hiding secrets. Using special scanning technology, scientists found two hidden structures under an ancient burial ground. The first is a shallow L-shaped structure, and below it is a much larger space that could be a final resting place or a chamber. The smaller structure was filled with sand on purpose, while the deeper one might be an empty chamber. Experts believe the two are connected, possibly as an entrance leading to a secret chamber. This is big news because it might give us some more insight into who built the pyramids and why. The world is full of ancient writing, but some messages refuse to give up their secrets, like the mystery of the Bashplemi tablet. This unusual stone, pulled from a lake in Georgia, is covered in symbols no one can read. Even with modern technology, experts are completely stumped. The tablet is about the size of a book, with 60 symbols carefully carved into its surface, but 39 of them don't match any known language. Some resemble scripts from ancient civilizations in the Middle East, India, and Egypt, but none are an exact match. To make things even trickier, part of the tablet is broken off, meaning a piece of the puzzle is missing forever. To rule out a hoax, scientists studied the tablet closely. They confirmed it's made of vesicular basalt, an extremely tough local rock. Whoever carved these symbols must have been really skilled. Based on similar archaeological finds, experts believe the tablet could date back thousands of years, possibly to the late Bronze or early Iron Age. Some symbols repeat, which could mean they're numbers. Maybe it's an inventory list, a record of battles, or even an offering to the deities. Until someone cracks the code, the Bashplemi tablet remains an unsolved mystery from the depths of history. Experts are still stumped with what this Minoan disk might mean. The Phaistos disk is one of the most mysterious finds from the Minoan civilization. This 6-inch clay object, discovered in 1908, has strange spiral markings that no one has fully decoded yet. The disk has 241 symbols on both sides, showing everything from people and animals to tools and plants. Experts have come up with many theories about what the symbols mean. Some think it's an early form of Greek. Others suggest it's a prayer or a hymn. And some even believe it could be a letter from a king in Anatolia to a Greek ruler. Let's see who will be the first to figure this out. It's always a fun day at an archaeologist's office when they find something as big as a 2,000-year-old marble head. A French archaeologist mission went digging inside an old medieval house near Alexandria in Egypt and found a statue's head depicting an old, possibly ill man. This statue dates from the last Egyptian dynasty before it became part of the Roman Empire, and the site where it was found is associated with the likes of Cleopatra and Mark Antony. For archaeologists, even the smallest finds at this site means a lot. You've heard of Lucy, right? The Australopithecus that was an early ancestor for us humans. Well, scientists found some of her species' footprints somewhere in Tanzania. The so-called Laetoli footprints are over 3 million years old. The trail stretched 88 feet and has about 70 footprints, left behind when a bunch of early humans walked across some wet volcanic ash. What's cool is that these early humans were already walking on 2 feet, like us, not all hunched over like apes. The close spacing of the prints shows they probably had short legs and a shorter stride than we do today. In an ancient Egyptian temple, archaeologists uncovered a shrine unlike any other, a place dedicated to falcons and two mysterious deities. One deity had a falcon's head, while the other wore a crown with a sun disk and cow horns. But the most baffling discovery was an inscription that read, "It is improper to boil a head in here." At the heart of the shrine, there are 15 headless falcons carefully arranged on a pedestal, likely as offerings to the falcon-headed deity. One theory suggests the birds were boiled first, perhaps to pluck their feathers, before being placed in the shrine, following the strange rule carved into stone. Archaeologists also found a 13-inch iron harpoon nearby. Its true purpose remains unknown, although the shrine also held remains of fish, mammals, and bird eggs, suggesting that the rituals may have included feasting. And speaking of ancient Egypt, meet Hathor. Scientists named her after the ancient Egyptian deity of motherhood, music, and singing. This wooden statue, housed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, was thought to be just a beautiful artifact, until a surprising secret was uncovered. Using an X-ray machine, experts found a mechanical operating system inside it, with pulleys and axles connecting her shoulder to her left leg. When activated, the system made her hand raise and lower, an engineering marvel from over 3,000 years ago. The statue was created during Egypt's Middle Kingdom, around 1800 BCE, and is often compared to 19th century automata due to its advanced design. It's believed the statue was used in religious ceremonies, symbolizing Hathor's role in dance and music. An unexpected discovery happened in northern Kuwait, where a Kuwaiti-Polish team uncovered a mysterious 7,500-year-old statue. The statue features an elongated skull, no mouth, narrow eyes, and a flattened nose. This feature is thought to be an Ophidian figurine, named after the Greek word for snake, and it was likely made by the Ubaid culture, a civilization known for their pottery skills. While no one knows exactly what role this weird statue played, it might have been linked to rituals or symbolic practices. Some scientists think these figurines, found in homes or final resting places, were tied to important cultural beliefs. We couldn't mention unresolved mysteries of this world without speaking about these elongated skulls. In the deserts of Peru, researchers uncovered 5 ancient skeletons, 2 with unnaturally elongated skulls. While head shaping was common in many cultures, these skulls defy explanation. Local legends tell tales of the so-called gentiles, a mysterious race banished underground by the powerful deities. Some say this is what the skulls represent. Others think this is some type of genetic anomaly, which was confirmed after finding an infant skull, too large to be artificially shaped.
Consider the Great Pyramids, one of the original 7 wonders of the world and the only one that still exists today. Did you know that the Pyramids of Giza weren't the only pyramids out there? And they weren't even the first ones. First, there were the pretty good pyramids, but they didn't catch on. Nah, I made that up. Back to the story. In ancient Egypt, it was believed that kings were chosen by gods to serve on earth as their mediators. In the afterlife, they were expected to become gods themselves. The pyramid complex was built to make sure that the king had everything they might need in the afterlife. The complex included the pyramid, a palace, and temples. The tomb in the pyramid, where the king was buried, was filled with many things they might need, like furniture, food, and gold vessels. Actually, the first pyramid had been built 80 years before the first Pyramid of Giza appeared. Overall, there were around 100 of them. Some weren't finished though, since the construction took a while and not every pharaoh lived long enough to see the end of the construction. And now let's talk about the construction itself. The biggest of the pyramids of Giza is as tall as a 40-story building. So how on earth did they manage to build a structure that massive 5,000 years ago, long before machines and other equipment appeared? Well, let's figure it out. So Pharaoh Khufu ascended the throne around 2575 BCE, and his architects started the construction of the oldest and biggest of the pyramids of Giza. He figured that over 2 million limestone blocks had to be used to build the pyramid, each weighing around 2.5 tons, around the weight of a rhino. The architect wanted to finish the construction in 20 years. To make it possible, a stone had to be carried and pushed into place every 4 minutes, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year, except leap year. So obviously, a lot of workers were needed to make it happen. Many believe that it was enslaved people who worked at the pyramid's construction site, but that's not true. Workers came from all over Egypt to contribute to the project, all in all, around 25,000 of them. The Egyptians were doing all kinds of work, starting with manual labor and crafting tools to administrative work. They all worked around 10 hours a day. They were housed and well-fed, and they were overall living a more comfortable life than an average Egyptian could afford at that time. Supposedly, the builders lived in a nearby temporary city and were a highly organized community with a strong leader. The pyramids seemed to be designed to align with the points on a compass, and their sides symbolized the rays of the sun. But back at that time, there were no compasses. Ancient Egyptians figured out the directions themselves and with amazing precision. To align the pyramids, they used 2 constellations. The construction site was arranged on the west bank of the Nile River. This also had a symbolic meaning. Just like the sun sets in the west, life sets in the west as well. The second pyramid of Giza was for Khufu's son, Pharaoh Khafre. It's a bit smaller, but this one has the famous noseless statue of the Sphinx. Of course, originally it had a nose. I would tell you what happened to it, but it's still a mystery, and no one knows for sure. Sphinxes have the body of a lion and the head of a human. They were considered guardians of important areas. This famous Sphinx, also pronounced Sphinx, has the head of Pharaoh Khafre and is guarding his pyramid, facing the sunrise. The Sphinx is one of the biggest and oldest statues in the world. Originally, it not only had a nose, but was also painted. Scientists have discovered traces of the red color of its face. So, most likely, the Sphinx was painted red. There are also remains of yellow and blue color on its body. The statue definitely wasn't boring. Till around 1800, the Sphinx was buried up to its shoulders until an adventurer with a team of 160 men dug it out. But let's get back to the construction. The workers, of course, needed stone blocks. There were 2 main places where people could get these stones. One source was close to the construction site, but that fossil-lined yellow stone was only suitable for the pyramid's interior. The limestone blocks for the exterior were hauled from 8 miles away on 30-foot-long sleds. Apparently, it wasn't too hard to pull them. The sand mixed with the right amount of water was pretty slick, and 10 people could move a sled even with a rock weighing so much. Surprisingly, cutting off a block of limestone wasn't the biggest problem. When in the ground, it was soft and could be split relatively easy. But after getting exposed to the air, limestone hardens. So the most difficult part was to shape the blocks. That step was crucial because the smallest inaccuracies could lead to the whole pyramid collapsing. So, okay, those limestones were mined, carried on a sled, shaped, and then what? How could they be put into place? Well, this is still a mystery. Archaeologists have discovered the remains of a ramp system that dates back around the time the pyramids were being built. So historians have come to the consensus that, most likely, the Egyptians designed a unique ramp system to move and pull huge stone blocks. The most common opinion is that there were several ramps around the pyramid. There probably was a central ramp with 2 staircases on each side of it built over the pyramid stones. The ramp was growing as the pyramid was getting higher. People might have been walking up the stairs, pulling up stones on wooden sleds. But this is just one of the options. Other experts say that the ramps were around the pyramid, and some say that the ramps were inside the pyramid. Maybe we will never know for sure, and it'll forever remain a mystery. The exterior limestone of the pyramid was polished with sand and stone until it gleamed. On top, there was a gold and silver capstone, which glimmered over Egypt like a second sun. So, that's how it was 5,000 years ago. Now, about the interior. Surprisingly, there's not much inside the pyramid. Most of it is just solid stone with very little open space. But let's take a quick look inside. From the entrance, there are two stairways, one going down and the other going up. They take us to the chambers. There are 3 of them inside. Now, why is that? Apparently, throughout the whole construction, a burial chamber had to be prepared at all times, just in case a pharaoh kicked the bucket before the construction ended. So, separate chambers were built one after another as the construction progressed. The last of them was the main one. It's called the King's Chamber. It's the one where Khufu was resting. It's the biggest room at the very heart of the pyramid, and there's a big passageway leading to it. It was likely used as a kind of elevator to move granite up to build the interior. Granite was also used to make 5 stories of support beams to ensure that the pyramid didn't collapse. And we can see that it worked since it's been standing for centuries. Unfortunately, none of these chambers have hieroglyphs on the walls. If you want to see the writings, you should go to the decorated tombs near the pyramids. Those pieces of art are depiction of ancient Egypt's culture and daily life. The texts allow researchers to study their language and grammar. The treasures that once were in the pyramids have been taken by people. There are also many secret tunnels and passages inside the pyramids, but even today, no one knows the whole plan of the interior. Scientists have been sending little robots with cameras inside for many years, but there's still a lot we don't know about the pyramids. Now they're trying to use an X-ray to scan the pyramids from the outside, without going inside. So yeah, ancient Egyptians did create a mystery no one has been able to crack for 5,000 years already. Take a look at these stones. They seem ordinary at first glance, just ancient slabs, ruins of some buildings. However, unlike many other archaeological finds, this one is among the most mysterious and unique. Here's why. These stones are the remains of a large temple complex called Puma Punku, located in Bolivia. Scientists aren't certain, but it's likely that Puma Punku was built by the Tiahuanaco Empire, which existed between 300 and 1000 CE, before the Inca Empire. There is no information suggesting that this civilization had advanced building technologies. Moreover, they might not have even had a writing system. Every stone was carved and polished with astonishing precision. They fit together perfectly, like pieces of a puzzle. The craft is so refined that not even a razor blade can pass between the stones. Quite impressive for people who lived around 1500 years ago. And these stones are heavy. The largest ones weighed around 130 tons. So, how did the builders transport such weight from one place to another? Scientists suggest that this civilization did not know about the invention of the wheel. So, how did they manage to build such a perfect engineering structure? Did Tiahuanaco have the knowledge and tools for stonework? Or did someone else build Puma Punku? There are several theories about this. Theory 1. There was some advanced civilization that came to South America, interacted with Tiahuanaco, built this engineering marvel, and then left. Theory 2. Some beings from another planet came to Earth, showed humans how to build perfect structures, and created Puma Punku. This theory is dubious. Another idea from this series suggests that Puma Punku was built by mythological creatures from the South American culture at that time. Theory 3, the most likely one. There is no mystery here. Tiahuanaco was indeed an advanced civilization with incredible building technologies. So, what do you think? Okay, we've seen some pretty rectangular stones used for building a temple. How about perfectly round stones for studying the starry sky? Or for some other purpose, it doesn't matter. So, welcome to Costa Rica. In the south of this country lies the so-called decaspheres. These are large, heavy, round stones created in the pre-Columbian era, around 600 CE. Now, each stone is made from a unique type of rock formed from cooled magma. In other words, someone waited for a volcanic eruption to end and for all the magma to cool, and then took all this material and carved these spheres from it. But how did they achieve such a perfect shape? Scientists suggest that people use small stones to grind and carve the cooled magma. Some specialists think that the stones were made for navigation. They could have indicated the way to certain places. Another theory claims that the deca squares were used for astronomy. No one knows for sure. We may never get the answer to this question because the people who knew the secret of the stones disappeared after the Spanish expansion. So, let's continue our journey. See these cobblestones? Archaeologists still don't know why they're arranged along a long stretch of desert crossing Jordan and Israel. These strange stones form a chain of lines 40 miles long and have been here since around 300 BCE. Because they were discovered by pilots during flights about 100 years ago, some call these stones kites. One of the more popular theories suggests that people placed these structures here to lure animals into a pit where they could be caught. Apparently, ancient hunters knew the behavior of local fauna well, and were sure the animals would somehow walk along these stones, ending up in an open area with a pit where hunters could easily do their work. Perfectly smooth rectangular and square stones, round stones, stone traps for animals. What's next? How about a stone canvas or stone painting? To see this ancient artifact, we'll travel to Glasgow, Scotland, where archaeologists unearthed a stone slab created about 5,000 years ago. It is called the Cockno Stone. The slab measures 43 by 26 feet, about half a basketball court. And this entire area is filled with strange swirling patterns that scientists call cup and ring marks. But what do they mean? As usual, scientists don't know for sure. But one theory suggests that the inscriptions on the stone are somehow related to astronomical phenomena, such as lunar or solar eclipses. Maybe it was a star map, or maybe people just wanted to create a work of art. In any case, there is another interesting fact related to the cup and ring marks. Scientists have found similar drawings in other prehistoric sites around the world. Okay, let's step away from mysterious stones and look at some other archaeological mysteries. Here is the approximate order of civilization development starting from 8000 BCE, according to scientists. First, people settle in one place and build a city or settlement there. Then they engage in agriculture, and after that, they build temples. But in 1994, archaeologists said, no, the order might have been different. What if people first built temples to worship higher mythical beings and only then built cities and engaged in agriculture? Let's go to Turkey, to the rural area of Göbekli Tepe, where in the mid-1990s, archaeologists discovered several stone pillars with carved animals on them. This ancient structure dates back to around the 10th millennium BCE. Now, this place is considered one of the oldest places of worship in the world. Most likely, it was built by semi-nomadic hunters who knew nothing about agriculture because it appeared in this region 5 centuries later. Now, scientists are wondering, is it true that such structures led to the settlement of the area? The answer to this question may help understand the mindset and development of humanity in many parts of our planet. So, would you like a scroll with the location of a treasure marked on it? You could say you already have one. Check it out yourself. Just Google the Copper Scroll Treasure. Download a high-resolution photo of the scroll and follow the instructions. Oops! The instructions are written in an incomprehensible language. Scientists have been trying to decipher this message since the scroll was discovered in 1952 in Qumran, and the answer is still not found. According to one theory, the scroll contains information about a large amount of silver and gold. But even if the treasure does not exist, this artifact is still quite interesting to study. It was created around 2,000 years ago, during the time when the Roman Empire ruled over the settlement of Qumran. Perhaps the local residents hid their valuables from the Roman legionnaires and left such a map for their descendants. When you approach this archaeological wonder, you won't notice anything. But if you rise into the air and look down at the ground, you'll see amazing patterns created by the people of the Nazca culture. This discovery is called the Nazca Lines. Pilots and passengers of commercial aircraft first noticed them in the 1920s and 30s during flights over Peru. These large drawings consist of geometric lines, complex images of animals, and whimsical figures. More than 2,000 years ago, people removed part of the surface soil of this land and created these patterns. But why? The Nazca Lines continue to captivate researchers and enthusiasts alike. Recent technological advancements, such as drone imagery and satellite mapping, have provided new insights into these enigmatic formations. Some researchers are now exploring the possibility that the lines serve multiple purposes, including communication with someone not from our world. And to some extent, this is true. Some scientists believe that the Nazca Lines were a ritual method for communicating with the deities of the Nazca civilization. Studying these archaeological wonders not only enriches our knowledge of the past, but also inspires us to appreciate the ingenuity and creativity of the human spirit.
Can you tell me what date it is today? Piece of cake. You just look at your smartphone and voila, you immediately know the day, month, and year. But was it always this easy to tell the date? Did the ancient people even have the concept of a year that lasts 365 days? Yes and no. Mayan calendars had cycles. That's close to what we call a year. But the Mayan cycle was much longer, 819 days. And this is where the mystery begins. 819 days compared to what? When does this calendar begin, and when does it end? Scientists were asking themselves this question for decades. They discovered and deciphered the Mayan calendar during the 1940s. Recently, two American scientists, John Linden and Victoria Bricker, came forward with a solution. So, what did they do differently from their predecessors? The duo deciphered the code by broadening their thinking. They expanded the calendar from 819 days to full 45 years. That's 20 times longer than the original cycle. And a pattern started to emerge. This was a major breakthrough because the Maya told time in a complicated way. You can forget about the easy-to-read Arabic numerals we have today. These ancient people used glyphs. These are tiny images that represent characters. Something like the icons on your desktop or universal symbols. When you see a little dot with 3 curved lines above it, you know there is a Wi-Fi network available. The Mayan calendar used glyphs that represented animals or natural phenomena. For example, there were symbols for a jaguar and an eagle. Each glyph marked one day. Each cycle is repeated 4 times, 8 and 19 x 4. Let's call these 4 cycles blocks. The Mayas colored each block differently. Scientists thought these colors corresponded to the 4 cardinal directions. Red was east, white, north. West was black, and finally, yellow marked south. But then the 1980s came. Yeah, this was a weird decade. The calculations were all wrong. Researchers determined that the colors were associated with the position of the sun in the sky. It turned out that the color yellow represented the highest point of the sun, which is called a zenith. White was the lowest point, called the nadir. It seems that the calendar showed just how good the ancient Mayas were at astronomy. This is most evident at Chichen Itza. This principal Mayan city is located on the Yucatan Peninsula, Mexico. There stands an impressive step pyramid. It is dedicated to the feathered serpent deity, and its alignment is perfect. Something marvelous happens here twice a year, during the equinoxes, March and September. These are the times when the sun shines directly over the equator. On these 2 dates, the day and night last the same. At the site of the pyramid, sunlight first illuminates the sculpture of the serpent head at the base of the structure. Then it makes its way up the 91 steps. This creates the illusion that a snake is slithering down the pyramid. Even today, people gather to witness the sight. And it must have been more impressive when the Mayas completed the structure 1050-1300 CE. Do you know what a synodic period is? Neither do I. But Mayan astronomers did. A synodic period is the time that passes before a stellar body does a full lap. For example, this is the period between 2 full moons. When you look from Earth, this period lasts roughly 30 days. And the Mayas were looking at the skies non-stop. They carefully noted the synodic periods of all planets. From Venus to Saturn, these ancient astronomers kept records of nearly all celestial bodies. But what does this have to do with their calendar? The American researchers' calculations revealed the link. Let's take the planet closest to the Sun as an example, Mercury. Its synodic period is 117 days. Multiply that by 7 and you get which number? Exactly 8 to 19, when 17 x 7 equals 819. Coincidence? Definitely not. Because synodic periods of other planets also neatly match the magical figure 819. But this is not visible from a single Mayan cycle. Scientists had to expand it several times to discover the pattern. There is a reason why no one could decipher the code for so long. They were focused on a single planet. The trick was to add the Mayan calculation for all the planets. Researchers just needed to see the bigger picture. This brings us to the year 2012. Can you remember that some people thought that the world would end on December 21st? That turned out to be a bust. We are alive and well now. But what started this false rumor? The Mayan calendar, of course. You see, these ancient people based their calendar on long periods of all the planets. That included a lot of complicated math and a lot of multiplying. This 2012 was simply the time when their cycle ended. It is known as the long count. This period is the same as our year. For the Mayas, 2012 was something like the 31st of December for us. Just an end of a cycle in which they measured time, so there was no need to panic. Those New Year's Eve parties might be a bit wild, but the world doesn't end on January 1st. The Mayas stretched more than their calendar. Rubber was the name of the game. Yes, you've heard it correctly. These ancient people were making different grades of rubber 3,000 years before one famous American did, Charles Goodyear. They would extract natural latex from the rubber tree. This is a milky substance that can be turned into rubber. And they weren't the only ones. Scientists found evidence that their neighbors, the Aztecs and the Olmecs, did the same. But what did they do with rubber? They didn't need car tires, definitely. But it's cool to have a nice pair of sandals for the beach. The Spanish wrote about rubber sole footwear that natives wore. Sadly, scientists still haven't found them. That would be a big step for archaeology. So the Maya were playful with rubber, literally. Researchers guessed that they produced balls from latex. These were bouncy and ranged in size from a softball to a soccer ball. A typical Mayan ball game, pits, involved 2 hoops. You must be thinking basketball, but not quite. The hoops were set on walls, 23 feet high. Compare that to the NBA standard of 10 feet. And the hoop was the other way around. There is also a sweet side to the story of the Mayas. These ancient people enjoyed chocolate. In fact, the modern word chocolate probably comes from their language, xocolotl. This meant bitter water. Okay, you get the bitter part, but why water? The Mayas didn't produce chocolate in the form we know it today. They didn't make bars of chocolate. They drank it. Smashed cocoa beans made for excellent drinks. The Mayas perfected the mixture over time and even added spices. Anyone up for a fiery chocolate drink with stew peppers and cornmeal? Who knows, maybe this beverage actually tasted well. Cocoa beans were sacred and used as a currency. Researchers believe all social classes got to enjoy it. Free chocolate for all sounds nice even today. But where did the Mayas get clean water for their cocoa drinks? From the oldest known filtration system in the Western Hemisphere. It was based on zeolite. These are minerals that contain aluminum and silicone compounds. And guess what? Modern air and water purifiers still use this material. Mayan tech wins yet again. Back in Europe, Roger Bacon developed a sand filtration system in 1627, some 1,800 years after the Mayas. But what about regions without rivers, lakes, or springs? Mayan engineers had it all figured out. Rainwater. They would carve out large reservoirs in the limestone bedrock. Then, they would coat these underground caves with a layer of a watertight material. The final step was to make small channels that collected water from the hills above. Scientists estimated that just one of these reservoirs could hold on average 10,000 gallons of rainwater, enough to fill 55 modern hot tubs.
We know that the ancient Egyptians were talented enough to build something as grand as the pyramids, but were they also smart enough to measure the speed of light? There's a theory circulating online that says exactly that. If you look at these 2 numbers, you'll see that they match completely. The first one is the speed of light in a vacuum measured in meters, and the second one is the latitude of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So, was it done on purpose, or is it just a coincidence? Well, happily, we can tell you that it's actually just a coincidence, not another conspiracy thingy. The Great Pyramid is just one of the many places in the world that share the same latitude. And more importantly, even if the ancient Egyptians had somehow measured the speed of light and chosen to keep it a secret from the rest of the world, they wouldn't have used meters to put it down. Meters were only defined at the end of the 18th century. The builders of the pyramids used a different unit of measure called cubits. 1 cubit is equal to 1.5 feet. Cubit was based on the length of the arm from the elbow to the tip of the middle finger, and it became popular in the ancient world. So if they wanted to impress the rest of the world and set the pyramids at a point that matched the speed of light in cubits, they would have to build their iconic constructions somewhere in Europe. And then the Danish astronomer who first measured the speed of light in 1676 would have been really upset to know that someone had done it centuries before him. So, although they were ahead of their time in many aspects, the ancient Egyptians never measured the speed of light or used longitude and latitude to map their locations. The base of the Great Pyramid of Giza might seem like a perfect square, but it's actually an 8-sided structure, not 4-sided. Each of its 4 sides has a subtle concave indentation that splits it evenly from base to tip. The official version is that a British pilot was the first to notice it in 1940 while flying over the pyramid. He took a photograph that showed shadows highlighting these indentations. Some people think these lines are only visible from above and can best be seen at dawn and dusk during the spring and autumn equinoxes. This has led to a freaky theory that the ancient Egyptians might have designed the pyramids to communicate with something looking at them from above. Now, the Great Pyramid is one of only 3 pyramids that used to have a swivel door. It weighed around 20 tons, but they could still easily open it from the inside. Its precise fit made it nearly invisible from the outside, with no visible latch or handle. There were only slight variations in the exterior stone that gave out an opening. The other 2 pyramids with similar doors belonged to Khufu's father and grandfather. The Great Pyramid also has a hidden void at least 100 feet long that was only found in 2017. We still don't know what lies within the space, what purpose it served, or if it is the only space of its kind. Researchers used the same tech to see through cathedral walls, Mayan pyramids, and even volcanoes. It depends on a natural shower of subatomic particles called muons. They pass more easily through empty space than through solid materials. So if they arrange multiple muon detectors around a structure, scientists can map out its solid and empty areas. A team of scientists placed muon detectors inside the Great Pyramid and allowed them to gather data for months. Scientists have analyzed samples of the mortar used to build the pyramids many times. Although we know its composition, modern technology still can't replicate it. The mortar is mostly made from processed gypsum, but it wasn't used like the cement we use for bricks today. Instead, they used it to support the joints between the massive stones as they were set in place. The estimated amount they needed to construct the Great Pyramid was around 500,000 tons of mortar. The gypsum mortar is stronger than the stones themselves and has held up for thousands of years. Now, all 4 sides of the Great Pyramid are aligned with the cardinal points – north, south, east, and west. According to geologist and engineer Glenn Dash, the alignment is accurate to within 4 minutes of arc, or 1/15th of a degree. The architects managed to achieve this without modern tools like drones, blueprints, or computers. Many researchers try to explain this construction miracle. Maybe they used the pole star or the sun's shadow. Dash recently proposed a new, simpler idea. The Egyptians might have used the autumnal equinox to align the pyramids. It happens twice a year when the Earth's equator passes through the center of the sun's disk, making day and night nearly equal in length. To test his theory, Dash conducted an experiment on the 22nd of September 2016, the first day of the fall equinox. He used a special rod the Egyptians had to cast a shadow and tracked its tip at regular intervals, forming a smooth curve. By connecting 2 points of the curve with a taut string, he created an almost perfect east-west line. Dash noted that on the equinox, The shadow's tip runs in a straight line, nearly perfectly east-west, and with a slight counterclockwise error. There's a similar error in the pyramids. Although his experiment was conducted in Connecticut, Dash believes that the same method would work in Egypt. All the ancient Egyptians needed was a clear, sunny day. They could determine the fall equinox by counting 91 days from the summer solstice. But they left us few clues, and no engineering documents or architectural plans have been found that explain their methods. So they might have mapped shadows, but it's not definite. Now, scientists have long wondered how heavy stone blocks were carried to the pyramid sites, and they might finally have an answer. A research team from the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, has discovered that 31 pyramids are likely to have been built along a long-lost ancient branch of the River Nile. It's now hidden under desert and farmland. For many years, archaeologists have thought that ancient Egyptians must have used a nearby waterway to transport materials, equipment, people, and whatever else they needed to build the pyramids on the river. But up until now, they weren't certain of the location, shape, size, or proximity of this waterway to the site of the pyramids. The group of researchers used radar satellite imagery, historical maps, geophysical surveys, and sediment coring to map the river branch. They believe it was buried by a major drought and sandstorms thousands of years ago. The team managed to go below the sand surface and get images of some hidden features thanks to radar technology. They found hidden rivers and ancient structures running at the foothills of where most of the ancient Egyptian pyramids lie. The discovery of this extinct river branch helps explain the high pyramid density between Giza and Lisht, in what is now an inhospitable area of the Sahara Desert. Now, Egypt isn't the only country with the most pyramids in the world. The champion's title here goes to its southern neighbor, Sudan. It has between 200 and 255 pyramids, compared to Egypt's measly 138. They were built by members of the Kingdom of Kush, an ancient civilization that ruled the lands along the Nile River many years ago. They started erecting pyramids around 500 years after the Egyptians had stopped doing it. Their pyramids are much smaller than the Egyptian ones, but were built for the same purposes. Archaeologists are still working to find out how the pyramids in the Sudan were built, how long it took to complete them, and what happened to their society. If there's a question that still baffles archaeologists to this day, it's this one. How did the ancient Egyptians build those magnificent pyramids? As far as we know today, their resources were quite limited, especially in terms of tools and building materials. We still don't have a fully satisfying answer, but hey, we've got some pretty amazing theories worth considering. The leading contender among these theories involves the clever Egyptians employing a sneaky strategy. Now picture this. They constructed a slanted and curving mound made of bricks, earth, and sand encircling the pyramid to be. As the pyramid grew taller and taller, they simply increased the height and length of this wacky structure. It's like they were playing an ancient game of Jenga. Now, how did they get those massive stone blocks up there? Well, according to the legendary ancient Greek historian Herodotus, they used sleds, rollers, and levers. It sounds like they turned construction into a supersized game of tug-of-war. And guess what? Herodotus also claimed that the Great Pyramid, the one from Giza, the granddaddy of them all, took a whopping 20 years to build. There's more. Herodotus also dropped a mind-boggling number on us. 100,000 men were supposedly involved in this pyramid extravaganza. Did they hire the entire Egyptian population? Well, it might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. These men were probably mostly farmers, so they probably focused on the pyramids when there wasn't much work to be done in the fields. Like during the flood season of the Nile River. Obviously, specialists in the archaeological community had something to add to this theory. By the late 20th century, they discovered some evidence that suggests the workforce might have been smaller and more permanent than previously thought. Instead of a massive army of 100,000 pyramid builders, they proposed that a modest crew of around 20,000 workers, accompanied by support personnel like bakers, physicians, and even spiritual leaders, could have gotten the job done. There was also this theory that claimed that the pyramids were actually built from the top downward. It suggested that these colossal structures were nothing more than isolated hills used as quarries. The stones were supposedly drawn from these hills, and over time, competing engineers took charge and transformed them into the iconic pyramids we know today. Now, before you dismiss this theory as a wild fantasy, some folks thought it wasn't completely crazy. After all, there are instances where isolated hills exist, so maybe this theory had a tiny glimmer of truth. Whether it involved ramp building or ingenious work schedules, one thing is clear: those pyramids have definitely left their mark on history and on our imaginations. Now, speaking of ancient Egyptian mysteries, there's this gigantic unfinished obelisk sitting in ancient Egypt, and scientists are trying to figure out how it was shaped. Now, some people suggest that our industrious ancestors used handheld pounders to get the job done. One expert has a different take on the matter, though. He argues that if we take a closer look at the pattern left behind by the shaping tool, we'll notice something peculiar. The walls of the trenches surrounding the obelisk display a neat and even pattern, which is pretty unlikely if they were pounded away by mere mortal hands. According to this expert, those horizontal striations are usually the result of a tool that takes breaks while removing material, leaving its mark on the surface. But wait, there's more. Imagine the tool being rocked back and forth against the trench walls, clearing away the waste to keep the trench from narrowing. Well, in that case, the tool might have left some funky horizontal striations where it was pressed against the sidewall. This sounds like some fancy technology at play, don't you think? And guess what? The dynastic Egyptians probably didn't have access to that kind of know-how. Another famous Egyptologist from way back also uncovered a bunch of core drills during his adventures. Although the actual drill bits are missing, his collection houses these particular core remnants made of limestone, alabaster, and even granite. These constructions aren't the only amazing thing the ancient Egyptians left behind, though. As it turns out, the Egyptians were the genius minds behind the creation of the handheld mirror. Yeah, that little mirror you use every day to check yourself out. But here's the twist. These mirrors are like pieces of art. They were decorated with inscriptions and figures. But that's not all. The Egyptians had a serious concern with their appearance. They knew the importance of personal hygiene and looking fabulous. So, in their quest for pearly whites, they invented toothbrushes and toothpaste. Dental problems were pretty common back then, and their smiles weren't exactly all white. Dentistry wasn't their strongest suit, you see. Maybe their minds were distracted by all that pyramid building. So that doesn't mean those ancient toothpaste recipes weren't amazing. One delightful concoction included rock salt, mint, dried iris petals, and pepper. Some brave dentists in the 21st century tried it out, and it worked pretty well. Ground-up ash was also used in another recipe to create a tooth cleansing paste. Mint was missing, so that didn't do much for their breath. That's when the genius Egyptians came up with the world's first breath mints. They made tablets from heated spices like cinnamon, and they mixed it with honey. Now, let's shift gears to home decor, Egyptian style. They surely took ornamentation to the next level. While the concept of decorating furniture started in Mesopotamia, the Egyptians cranked it up a notch. They went all out with different colors of ink and even developed various weights of paper. Oh, and let's not forget about those cute little area rugs we all have in our homes today. Guess who came up with the idea? Yep, the Egyptians. They used the versatile papyrus plant to make those cozy rugs. And speaking of trends, the Egyptians loved their knickknacks. They had an assortment of small figurines in the shapes of cats, dogs, and people. These statues were made from various materials, like simple sun-dried mud to the ultimate bling of gold. It all depended on how loaded you were. The Egyptians were also all about farming, and they knew that clean water was crucial for their crops and animals. That's why they came up with some nifty inventions and techniques to make sure their land was fertile and their plants were happy. First off, they had the genius idea of using ox-drawn plows. They had two types of plows, heavy and light. The heavy plow would strut its stuff, cutting deep furrows in the soil, while the lighter plow followed behind, fluffing up the earth. But they didn't stop there. After plowing, the Egyptians would break up clumps of soil and sow the rows with seeds. To give those seeds a good old squish into the furrows, they'd march their livestock across the field, effectively closing up the furrows. But hey, all that hard work would be pointless if their seeds were as dry as the Sahara. That's where irrigation comes into play. The Egyptians were so good at it that other cultures, like the Greeks and Romans, couldn't help but copy their techniques. Now let's switch gears and talk about the marvelous architecture of ancient Egypt. These folks weren't just skilled farmers, they were also architectural maestros. They built these fancy canals to carry water to farms and villages, and boy, did they know how to make those canals look pretty. Just imagine strolling along a canal lined with ornate structures. The pharaoh Ramesses the Great was quite the overachiever when it came to construction. One of his mind-blowing creations was the construction located at Abu Simbel. This building was designed so that twice a year, the sun would shine directly into it and illuminate the statues of Ramesses. And let's not forget about the corbelled arch. Without this architectural gem, we'd be missing out on some mind-boggling structures like the Great Pyramid. The Egyptians knew how to make things stand tall and proud, thanks to their engineering and construction wizardry. They built grand halls and inner sanctums that make your jaw drop. And some of these temples doubled as astronomical observatories. Secant, cosine, tangent, sine, 3.14159. Yeah, that was the cheer we heard coming from the trigonometry club back in the day. For the rest of us in math class, terms such as sine, tangent, and pi were just bewildering. Who invented these and why? Was their only purpose to make it harder for students? Well, not quite. Trigonometry was invented by the ancient Egyptians. They needed this knowledge to construct pyramids, and they did a pretty good job too. The Great Pyramid in Giza still stands today, some 4,500 years after it was built. No recalls either. So let's get out of that classroom and on a journey through time to reveal the secrets behind the ancient Egyptians' precision. Here you are, standing on the Great Pyramid's construction site, some 9 miles from Cairo. Well, the city still isn't there, as you're surrounded only by the desert and teams of construction workers. They're transporting large stone blocks weighing 2.5 tons each. They're inside a wooden sled that sits on large rollers. A crew of 8 men rolls these blocks along the ground. You immediately think of the rollers on a supermarket cash register. The principle is exactly the same, but the scale is greater, much greater. Scientists estimate that the Egyptians used 2.3 million such blocks in the Great Pyramid alone. And the block in front of you is one of the lighter ones. The heaviest of them weighed up to 15 tons. But where did all these blocks come from? Most of them originated from quarries around Giza. It's not that impressive, you think, but wait until you hear how ancient engineers transported the granite used in construction over 500 miles to the pyramid. There were no railways or highways back then, but the mighty Nile was always there. Researchers even believe that the Egyptians dug a canal to connect the Nile directly to the pyramid's construction site. All they had to do then was to wait for the flood season to begin, and voila! The rising water levels floated the heavy stone blocks for them. But how did they lift the enormous stones on dry land to stack them up to the top? Did they use oversized cranes? Well, ancient Egyptians worked around this problem, literally speaking. One of the workers is now pointing to the giant ramp going around the pyramid they're building. This is how a mountain road zigzags its way to the top. If the ramp went directly to the top of the pyramid, then workers couldn't pull the stone blocks along it. It would be too steep. Scientists have calculated that 8% could be the maximum incline. So ancient Egyptians just extended the ramp around the pyramid. Again, these are all theories, as the ramp could have been inside the pyramid, as some researchers suggest. The exact building method is still a mystery, guarded by the Sphinx. That's its real name, right? Wrong. As the Great Sphinx is just the statue's alias. You know, the name writers take when they want to hide their true identity, or a singer's stage name. The Sphinx's real name, translated from Egyptian, means Horus in the horizon. That was the name for the Egyptian deity of the sky. The trail of mystery doesn't end there. As a man walks past you with a bucket of paint, he's going to add a touch of color to the Great Sphinx. Researchers found specks of this red color next to its ear. That was some strong paint, as it survived for thousands of years. You are now standing straight in front of the Sphinx. You look up. It's very tall, right? 66 feet to be precise. Now resist the urge to take a selfie. You can do it. Now you notice something else. It looks like the Sphinx is in the center of a giant triangle in the back. That's one side of the Great Pyramid. And no, your eyes are not playing tricks on you. The Sphinx really does sit in the center of the pyramid's lateral face. Here's where math comes in handy. A pyramid has 4 sides, called lateral faces. There's also a 5th face, the base, but that's not visible. It's, wait for it, face down. The Sphinx has one last mystery to reveal: its age. Scientists agree that Pharaoh Khafre built the Sphinx. He ruled after his father, who had built a Great Pyramid nearby. So both structures were finished around the same time. Let's talk about numbers again. You've heard of Cleopatra, the Egyptian princess described as a woman of great beauty.
Hello?
She saw the pyramids, but she lived closer to the time of the first iPhone than the time of the people who built the pyramids. Fascinating, right? You can see thousands of people around you. They're working hard to build the pharaoh's tomb. But how many of them are there exactly? One Greek philosopher estimated there were as many as 100,000 workers. Seems like an okay number for such an enormous structure, but it can't be true. Science simply can't back up this number. Egyptologists put the total number of workers at 30,000. And yes, Indiana Jones was one of them, at least on the big screen, but he showed up late. Egyptologists know a lot about the pyramids, but not everything. Not because they don't want to, but because they haven't yet dug up enough evidence. They can only guess how the building process went. First, engineers would arrive to choose the right spot and do the necessary measurements. That's why they needed all that complicated math. Then, it's time for sourcing the material, the large stone blocks I mentioned earlier. When boats deliver them to the site of the future pyramid, workers can finally do their thing. They operated in smaller groups, but there were at least 2,000 of them chiseling and carving away at any given time. Sounds like a typical construction site today? Well, that's because it is, just thousands of years ago. It's amazing what ancient Egyptians were able to achieve with just copper and stone tools. The pyramid is now complete in front of you. But is it the same pyramid we see today? Why is this structure shining bright in the desert sun? Isn't it supposed to be a dusty yellow color? Well, no. Human activity and the elements have completely stripped the outer layer of stones over time. Expert craftspeople polished these blocks using nothing but stone and sand. The end result was a smooth and shiny rock. On the day it was completed, the Great Pyramid of Giza was a perfect triangle of light. Its polished sides acted like giant mirrors, reflecting the powerful Egyptian sun. This is the point where you should put your glasses on, and that shiny thing you see at the pyramid's very top is actually gold. The capstone at the top of the pyramid is called a pyramidion. It was covered in sheets of gold. As you can guess, these were the first stones to disappear. Let's make another stop before we get you back to your classroom. We travel to the British Isles, and no, Stonehenge isn't our destination. It is Newgrange in County Meath. Scientists estimate that the ancient peoples of Ireland built this stone monument around the year 3200 BCE. This makes it older than both Stonehenge and the Great Pyramid in Giza. The function of the circular mound in Newgrange is the same as the one of the Great Pyramid and equally mysterious. The estimated amount of loose stone present in the valley is over 220,000 tons. And it's not just randomly thrown on a pile. The order in which the stones are set makes the structure water-resistant. That would explain how Newgrange had survived for so long. Kinda makes you want to splash out the cash for that waterproof phone case, huh? Well, you're back in your school desk, but today's math lecture is the last thing on your mind. You're thinking about how great the Egyptian pyramids are, and if we have something similar today. It turns out modern engineers are just as impressed with the Great Pyramid as you are. There's a glass pyramid sitting in the main courtyard of the famous Louvre Museum in Paris. The panorama of San Francisco wouldn't be complete without the 48-story Transamerica Pyramid. But Las Vegas went the furthest. There we find the Luxor Hotel. It's so big that it's the third largest pyramid on the planet. And guess what's in front of it? Yup, a replica of the Sphinx. It's 110 feet tall, 2 stories higher than the one in Giza. Yeah, everything's bigger in Vegas.
On October 30th, 1759, the inhabitants of the Middle East were jolted awake by an earthquake. Cracks appeared in the walls of their homes, roofs began to crumble. People ran out of their homes and gathered in open areas. But because of strong shocks, they kept losing their footing and falling. A month later, there was another earthquake, but it turned out to be even stronger. Trees broke, houses collapsed, deep cracks appeared in the ground. The disaster lasted for 2 minutes. Oases, roads, and cities were destroyed. Incredibly, Baalbek's ancient buildings withstood earthquakes. Some historians state that this majestic and mysterious place was built during the Roman Empire, but many researchers disagree. Whatever the truth is, the city is one of the main archaeological phenomena of humankind. The most amazing building of Baalbek is the Temple of Jupiter. The inhabitants of the Roman Empire believed that Jupiter held power over lightning and thunder. The building looked like a platform with 54 columns. A massive roof rested on these columns. Today, you can only see 6 70-foot-high columns. Each of them consists of 3 sections and resembles a pencil. The cores of these pencils were made of lead. This made the columns exceptionally strong. Each of these pieces of stone weighed an incredible 80 tons. That's the weight of 35 Ford Explorer SUVs. Look, this is the largest block in the Great Pyramid of Giza. But compared to the blocks from Baalbek, it doesn't even look that impressive. The foundation under the Temple of Jupiter was preserved. That's how specialists figured out it consisted of about 25 monolithic stones, weighing 450 tons each. It means that the blocks from Baalbek weigh almost 4 times more than the blocks from Egypt. There are 3 more enormous limestone blocks in the foundation. They weigh 800 tons each. This is more than twice the weight of a Boeing 747 plane. Ancient builders must have had a hard time carving such giants from a piece of stone. And after that, they also had to pull them to the construction site and lift them to a significant height. Repeating these logistics would probably turn out to be a nightmare for present-day builders. To do this amount of work, they would need modern equipment. But Baalbek's constructors didn't have trucks, cranes with circular saws, or electricity. How did the builders of the past manage to do this? Scientists have a theory that includes ropes, winches, and lever systems. Naturally, the engineers of the past made all the gadgets from wood. Around 3,000 feet away from the ruins of the temple complex, there's a quarry. Archaeologists suppose that's where the stones for the construction were cut. They found a block of limestone there. It seemed to be too large, even for this incredible place. The monolith got called the Stone of the South. It was 65 feet long and 13 feet wide. The ancient builders didn't have time to completely separate it from its mother rock. A group of scientists from Austria estimated that this piece of limestone weighed more than 1,000 tons. That's like 3 Boeing aircraft, or 160 African elephants. There was another surprise awaiting the archaeologists near the Stone of the South. It was the second monolith that weighed more than 1,200 tons. But the ancient builders didn't stop at that. They continued to work. In 2014, in the same quarry, German archaeologists unearthed a block that weighed 1,650 tons. No one has figured out yet why people of the past needed a piece of stone that weighed as much as 125 school buses. It's also unclear how they were going to move this giant and why they didn't finish the job. In any case, this third monolith is the largest processed piece of stone in human history. There are more questions than answers. Some researchers believe that people of the past had high-tech equipment. Others don't think so, but are eager to understand how the builders managed to move those stones. There's a huge number of ancient buildings and artifacts on the planet. Lots of them make researchers scratch their heads. Near the Pyramid of Djoser in Egypt, archaeologists have found a network of tunnels. This place is called Serapeum. It contains 24 sarcophagi weighing from 70 to 100 tons. The giant boxes are carved from a single piece of granite and covered with heavy lids. The sarcophagi are perfectly symmetrical. To the touch, their walls are as smooth as glass. Even with the current level of technology, this is very difficult to do. But the ancient Egyptians managed this feat. The Lycurgus cup is a priceless artifact and example of ancient nanotechnology. It's made of glass that can change its color. If you put a source of light in front of the cup, it turns green. If the light is behind the goblet, it becomes deep red. In this case, the figure of Greek king Lycurgus turns pale purple. Scientists understood how this color change worked only at the end of the 20th century. Through microscopes, they saw nanoparticles of silver, gold, and copper. They had been added to the glass matrix. Thanks to this, you can observe a color change called dichroism. Interestingly, the gold and silver were grounded into a fine dust. It's almost impossible to do this by accident. Most likely, the ancient experts knew for sure what they were doing. Bolivia has a curious place called Puma Punku. It looks as if an ancient giant played there with an enormous construction set. And after the game, they forgot to put the pieces back into the box. But there are no giants, and the huge stone blocks were carved by ancient builders over 1,500 years ago. Some of the rocks weigh 100 tons. The blocks were brought to an altitude of almost 13,000 feet above sea level from the quarry 60 miles away from the construction site. There's no forest in that area. This means the builders couldn't use trees to make wooden rollers. The monument belongs to the Inca civilization. Scientists are sure they didn't know anything about wheels. In 1992, the inhabitants of a Chinese village decided to drain a pond. Their ancestors had been using it to wash clothes and catch fish for hundreds of years. They kept pumping the water out for 17 days. At the bottom of the reservoir, they made an unexpected discovery. The villagers saw an entrance to a cave going down to a depth of 100 feet. The incredible find was named the Longyu Caves. Unknown builders carved out 320,000 square feet of galleries. There are separate rooms, bridges, pools, and columns that support the ceiling. The walls of the cave are covered with strange carved lines and patterns. Scientists haven't found any information about who built the caves and why they did it. The construction technology also remains a mystery. Antonio Stradivari lived in Italy in the 18th century. He created musical instruments. More than 600 of his works have survived to this day. 500 of them are violins. One of the instruments was sold at auction for $16 million. The violins made by this master sound clear and deep. Researchers can't understand why Stradivarius instruments produce such unique sounds. Perhaps it's all about the varnish the master used to cover the violins. The answer may also lie in the wood the instruments are made of. In those days, Europe had a cold climate. Because of this, the wood became denser, and the instruments made of it sounded especially pleasing to the ear. In the Indian city of Delhi, there's a 23-foot-high pole. It weighs 6.5 tons and is made of 98% wrought iron. The 1,600-year-old pillar has no signs of rust or decay. Scientists believe that the monument is so well preserved thanks to the dry weather and the chemical composition of the metal. It might be resistant to corrosion. And still, researchers don't know how the blacksmiths managed to make an iron pillar that's not afraid of rust. It seems like a tough feat, even for modern metallurgists. The Al-Nasla rock is divided into two parts by a perfectly straight slit. Each boulder stands on a small pedestal. Some people believe this is the evidence of ancient laser technology. But geologists think the split happened due to the ground shifting or natural vibrations that occurred under the rock. This process led to the appearance of the crack. It had been deepening for thousands of years, and gradually, the natural monument took the form you can see today.
Wow! Scientists have found a lost city beneath Egypt's pyramids. And it's incredibly large, bigger than the biggest target you can imagine. Underground chambers, passageways, and vertical structures. Scientists have no idea what purposes they serve. But let's start from the very beginning. Italian and Scottish scientists studying the Pyramid of Khafra discovered something that looked like secret tunnels under 3 pyramids. This find might change what we know about ancient Egypt. The expedition, called the Khafra Project, was led by Corrado Malunga from Pisa, Italy, and Filippo Biondi from the University of Strathclyde, Scotland. Their mission was to focus on exploring Khafra's pyramid, the second largest on the Giza Plateau. Scientists uncovered a massive structure beneath the Pyramid of Khafra. Could it be an ancient Egyptian underground city? The experts analyzed the data they had and came to the conclusion that 8 large vertical structures could be hiding beneath, possibly wells or shafts. They extend a staggering 6,500 feet across. Imagine placing 2.5 Burj Khalifas on the ground, one after another, and you get the sheer size of this find. These shafts also plunge nearly 2,000 feet underground. Some of the deepest underground stations in the world are located at a mere 380 feet underground or so. These cylindrical shafts are surrounded by spiral paths. Picture some old Gothic castle. They're connected to 2 giant, weirdly shaped chambers. Are those cubes? Or possibly bowls? Each of these chambers is likely more than 260 feet across. Now, even though we know about the structures now, no one has figured out their original purpose yet. Want to hear something even more shocking? Okay then. The team is almost sure that similar access points can be found under all 3 pyramids. In other words, all of them might be linked by a hidden system of underground tunnels, chambers, and passages. Even deeper, about 4,000 feet under the surface, there might be more unknown structures. And doesn't it add to the mystery? But the coolest news is that, according to some team members, these hidden structures near Giza pyramids could align with the legendary Halls of Amenti. In ancient Egyptian mythology, it's a place where people are believed to arrive when they're close to the end of their days. There, they are said to take a 3-day-long trial, facing their biggest fears. Now, how did scientists even discover these hidden spaces? To uncover them, researchers used 2 satellites positioned 420 miles above Earth. They sent radar signals to the Giza Plateau, and these signals generated detailed images, which were later compiled into a 3D model of the underground layout, including the newly detected shafts. Then, using synthetic aperture radar or SAR technology, which is a type of radar that can penetrate through stone, the team also spotted 5 small room-like structures hidden deep within the pyramid. One of these chambers contained a sarcophagus, which was once thought to be the tomb of Pharaoh Khafre. But now, scientists believe this was a mistake. The true burial site is likely to be elsewhere. In any case, these 5 hidden rooms were completely unknown before the scans. They seem to be arranged in the center of the pyramid and are linked to underground pathways leading somewhere below the structure. There's an opinion that these tunnels could lead to more hidden chambers and wells. Some of them might be around 4,500 years old. Wow, what if they help us solve ancient civilization mysteries? Preliminary data suggests that all this underground space can be much more than a few empty chambers. There might be many more hidden structures near the Giza pyramids. How come? Well, the thing is, the structure appears to include hollowed-out sections with spiral pathways leading even deeper underground. Refining the images hinting at this could reveal an extensive subterranean network. It might be a whole city hidden under the surface. Now, despite the excitement surrounding these findings, there are also a lot of people who don't believe in the existence of the underground city. They're skeptical about the archaeological discovery in Egypt due to the lack of peer-reviewed verification. That's why several archaeologists and radar experts have challenged the validity of the claims. They've explained that the technology used to make the discovery may not be advanced enough to produce such detailed underground imagery. According to them, the 5 smaller chambers found near the surface could be natural formations, since the area had had sacred significance long before the construction of the pyramids. Some experts have even dismissed the use of radar methods in this context altogether. They call these methods scientifically unproven and question their accuracy. The discovery has also reignited discussions about ancient Egyptian myths and the possibility of hidden texts lying somewhere beneath the Giza pyramids. The layout of the newly detected underground chambers shares similarities with mythological accounts of the Hall of Records, a rumored chamber that could preserve early Egyptian wisdom. If confirmed, these findings could significantly reshape the understanding of Egypt's sacred topography. Plus, this lost city beneath Egypt's pyramid could become physical evidence of previously unknown underground structures. That's why the Khafre project is super eager to begin excavating to confirm their findings. But getting approval from Egyptian authorities is a challenging process. The discoveries still need to undergo peer review before they are accepted by the academic community. By the way, this recent archaeological discovery in Egypt comes on the heels of another discovery involving a weird structure beneath the Royal Giza Cemetery, which researchers believe is unnatural in origin. Archaeologists used remote sensing techniques and uncovered a mysterious L-shaped structure underground in the Western Cemetery of Giza. This area is known to house burials of royal family members and high-ranking officials. Many of the tombs in the cemetery have above-ground mastabas, rectangular stone or mud brick structures with flat roofs. But there is an area in the center of the cemetery where there are no above-ground structures. To investigate this unexplored region, the team used electrical resistive tomography and ground-penetrating radar. ERT works by sending electrical currents into the ground and measuring the resistance to detect remains. As for GPR, it sends radar into the ground and maps the structures based on the radar's return. The team found an anomaly about 6.5 feet beneath the surface. It appeared to be an L-shaped structure measuring at least 33 feet in length. The readings suggested that the structure had been backfilled with sand after its construction. This made the team hypothesize that it could be a mix of sand and gravel, or possibly an air void. This anomaly was classified as a highly resistive structure, which meant it didn't occur naturally. Motoyuki Sato, the study's lead author and professor at Tohoku University in Japan, claims that the structure is not a natural formation due to its sharp shape. Another weird thing about ancient Egyptian pyramids is that historians have long believed that they were built primarily for royals and high-status individuals who had the wealth and power to create such massive structures. However, new research from the archaeological site of Tombos in modern-day Sudan challenges this assumption. The thing is, Tombos' pyramid may have served as burial sites for low-status workers as well as elites. The hard-working members of ancient communities may have found their last resting place in some of the most visible monuments, including the pyramids. Located along the Nile River in the ancient region of Nubia, Tombos became part of Egypt after its conquest of the area around 1400 BCE. That's when Egypt established the site to strengthen its colonial control. Workers at Tombos built pyramids, but those were much more modest than the famous pyramids of Giza. The research team reanalyzed 110 human skeletons from Tombos, originally studied in 2012. In particular, they examined the entheses, the areas where tendons and ligaments attach to bones. Such an analysis can give us insights into the amount of physical labor a person performed. When someone does hard labor, their bones often develop distinct crests and ridges at these attachment points due to the stress on the tendons and ligaments. And while some skeletons showed little change in their entheses, suggesting they belonged to individuals from the upper classes, others showed more serious changes. It means they belong to lower-class workers. This finding can totally challenge our earlier understanding of pyramid burials, especially the idea that only elites were buried in the pyramids, because the pyramids themselves were designed for the elite. This recent research may prove that lower-class workers may have found their final resting place in these monumental structures too.